All right, so this is where we left off last time, and this is where we want to go today. There it is. There it is. So we want to have this up here look like that there, and we have a border. We already put this background color on there, but we need to put the rest of it in. So let's take a look at our HTML in our CSS, and we can see that we have a body background color. So the next thing we want to do is set our main. And so we'll use the main selector. And for this one, what we want to do is we want to have this green area here. It looks really small on here, but it's actually 5% of the screen width. To do that, we're going to set the width at 90%. And in order for it to not have 10% on the left, and 10% on the right and nothing on the left, we're going to add some margin. And the margin that we're going to do is we're going to set a 1em top margin to push down from the body. And then we're also going to use auto, which is going to take that 10% and then split it from one side to the other, and that will center main on our page. Okay, the next thing we want to do is do a background color. And the background color we're going to be using is a yellow-green. So where is it? And tell me I don't have it open anywhere. I do not. All right, so in order to do that, I'm going to go to my favorite website, which is HTML color codes dot and thinking, and there it is. And I always go to the names section. That's going to give us 144 different colors, which is plenty for me. If you go to the picker, that's going to allow you to pick any one of 16.7 million colors by using these right here. To me, that's overkill, but if you want to tweak a little bit and say, well, I'd like to have it a little bit of darker green, you can always use the picker for that. So we're going to go down and look for yellow-green. It's down in the greens. So let's see, there's green, yellow. There's yellow-green. So that's what we want to use for main. So I'm just going to copy this. All three of these will work, but as a developing professional, never use the name. This is using old school, and this is what developers use nowadays. You can use the hue, saturation, and light, but I don't get it. And I have seen very few websites using that. So I'll go Control V. Notice it looks not right, and this should be all lowercase. I'm not sure why they didn't put that in the website that way. And again, a semicolon at the very end. All right, and the last thing we want to do is put some border on there, and that border is going to be a dark green, this right here. So we're going to use a shortcut for that, and that is border. And border has three different attributes we can set. One is, what is the width going to be? And we made it a 20 pixel width. And the second attribute, and there's no commas in between, is going to be whether you want it solid or dashed or any one of the other styles. We always use solid. Oops, wait a minute. No. So nothing in between, as I said, and then I put something there. All right, and then the last thing is what color we want, and we want to use this color right here. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it in. Again, semicolon at the end, and make RGB small. If it was capital, it would still work. It just would look ugly up here, and everyone would laugh at you. All right, so now that we have that main, if we do File, Save All, and then go back to our page and refresh, boom. So you can see now 5% on each side. There's our dark color, and there's our header, and that's the next thing that we have to figure out. So we have some problems here. Notice there's some space here and here. If I hadn't put it in the figure, it would be nicely tucked into this corner. But as I mentioned, I don't like to have inline elements lying out there because it tend to be unforeseen consequences, sort of like with floats, unforeseen consequences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to encapsulate it. Well, we already did encapsulate it in a figure tag, which is a block level element, which is why it's standing by itself out here. But we need to get rid of that margin. And so that's easy to do. And that's the only thing actually we're going to be doing is I'm going to say figure and then margin 0. Again, we don't put the pixels at the end just in case later on we have margins of 1 EM and then we have 0 pixels, and it could be some problems with that. So anytime you're using 0, just use 0 by itself. And notice I didn't put header, even though, let's see, this figure is inside header, and that's the one I want to get rid of. When I'm developing, in fact, I usually stick this right underneath body, and that's where I do all my global attributes. If I want to overwrite whatever the browser is using, I usually use those right after body and then list them there. It's fine if it's here, since that is going to be in our header. And then we do file and save all and then refresh. Boom. So you can see now I've taken away those spaces. That was pretty easy. All right. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to move this one off to the left. It starts here at the left because it's the first thing in the container and it's taking up that entire side. This one here is down there because it's the last thing in the container, and I want to move this up here. So we're going to go ahead and float both of these pictures. And we're not going to float the images. We're actually going to float the header. So I'm going to say, the figure, header, figure, and then the first one is going to be the first child. So without a space, first dash child. And for this one, I'm going to float to the left. And then for the girl or the woman, it's going to be header, figure, and that's the last element. So that'll be the last child. This selector will not work if one of these is not correct. So if I had another element in there, say a paragraph tag on for some reason underneath this picture, then that wouldn't be the last child. The paragraph child would, and it wouldn't use this because it has to be a figure and it has to be the last child. Okay, so this one is also going to be float and right. All right, so let's see what we've done. We'll do file, save all, and refresh. Boom. And all sorts of mess here. You can see that we got some space over here. We have, that's because of this Trident Tennis Center, right? This is actually taking up the entire container, and that's why it's pushing this picture down. This picture here, of course, is underneath because it's the last thing rendered in that header. And then the navigation and some of the other stuff pushed up into the space that was empty. Also it's a mess. Easy to fix that though. So the first thing I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to go, well, actually it's just one thing I have to do, and that is, again, I'm moving up here because I want the parent to be above the children. So the header, I'm going to say overflow auto. And that's going to take away the border collapse. File, save all, and refresh. Better. See, so now this is back down where it's supposed to be, but I still have these problems here. And the problem is, again, this is still running underneath that. That's why it's centered, but it's left aligned along that picture. And this one can't because once it's rendered next on the page, there's no space because this is taking up the rest of it. So what we want to do is we want this right here to be placed. We want it to be inline block, and we want it to be the width of the container. And we could do that by using just H1 and H2. But I find that's kind of sloppy and again leads to unforeseen consequences. If I want to do something with these two, I need to put them into their own container and then control them using that container. So let's go back into here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some HTML because I need to create a container. Right now, this H1 and H2 are all by themselves. I want to have it so that in the header, there's 3 children. Figure, the container for H1 and H2, and this other figure. And for that, I'm going to use a div because a div is just a generic block level element. So div dot header container. Now, when I do the dot, what I'm going to do is it's going to automatically create a class called header container, and it's going to fix all my HTML. Then when I press tab, bam, it's done. The problem is this div right here can't be there. It has to be underneath H2. So I'm going to cut it out, not copy it. I'm going to cut it because it doesn't belong there. Then go to the end of H2 and paste it in. Boom. Now these are children of that div, so I'm going to tab them in so it looks pretty. So 3 children, figure, div, figure. Inside div are 2 children, H1, H2. And now this div here controls these H1 and H2. They remain block level elements, but as the container shrinks, they're going to start to wrap, moving down, not singing. All right, let's see what we have. Well, we haven't actually done anything yet. That div won't actually change the way this looks. It'll look exactly the same. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go in there, and I'm going to put that here because it's a class within header. So I'm going to do, although we can use that class all over the page if we want to. We could have just called it, block element container because it's a container that has block elements in it. But we'll use dot, and it's important that you type the dot, header dash container, because that's the name of our class. So it's going to select that. And what we want to do is we want to change the display to inline block. Seems kind of silly. We created a block level element and then immediately turned it into an inline block. But unfortunately, HTML5 does not have a inline block element. It only has inline elements and block elements, so we have to do one way or the other. All right, and then the next thing we want to do is we want that width to be whatever the space is in between this side here and that side there. That's the space. So we're going to use a calculation for that. We'll let the browser decide or figure that out themselves. So we'll say width, and then we'll use the calc function. Calc. Inside the parentheses, we'll say measure 100% of the width of the container, and then subtract 500 pixels. And where did I get the 500 pixels from? Well, each of these pictures is 250. So 250 plus 250 is 500. And we want to subtract the 2 pictures, and then whatever's left, make that the width of the container. So let's go ahead and check it out. File, save all, and then refresh. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, it also has made this flexible. Uh-oh, wait a minute. Oh, see, it's not right. Why isn't that centered? And that's because I need to go up here to body. I forgot to do that in the initial thing. I always do that when I start out also. I will say text align center. I have found almost all elements on a web page tend to be centered, and I'd rather uncenter them than have to center all of them as I'm creating them. So file, save all, and then refresh. Ah, much better. So you can see that now we have some. So as I make this bigger and smaller, and then even smaller still, you can see then it starts to wrap, and then wrap some more, and then wrap some more, all the way down to here. So you can see that when we start creating our media queries, one of the things we'll do is say, oh, wait a minute. There is a breakpoint right there. Once it gets to here, it doesn't look good anymore. So I can either have to reduce the size of the pictures, or um, I'm going to have to make some other changes. But you can see everything is working perfectly now. And it's always good to check to see, make sure that this is fluid in design right now, because we want to be as fluid as possible, because the more fluidity we have, meaning that everything adjusts to the size of the screen, then media queries become easier because that's less that we have to worry about. If we had to sit there and write a media query for every 15 pixels because things weren't working out, there'd be a lot of code, and we don't want to do that. All right, so that's the end of this lesson. Next, we'll be working on the nav.